Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Film Club podcast, where every month we deep dive into a different aspect of cinema. An actor, director, franchise, or genre. Whatever it is, it's always fun at the Film Club. I'm Dean.
I'm Boo.
And this month we're talking about Westerns. And this week we are talking about
The good,
the bad,
and the ugly.
Yes, directed by Sergio Leone, starring Clint Eastwood, Eli Wallach, and Lee Van Cleef. This is one of the most definitive westerns of the latter half of the 20th century. It's an epic to end all epics. It is probably Sergio Leone's most iconic film, and it made Clint Eastwood into a household name overnight, huge star. But yeah, Good and the Bad and the Ugly. This was your first time watching it?
Yeah, the only thing I'd seen was obviously the standoff, because in cinema, how do you not see the standoff? But yeah, this was a very new movie to me.
Yeah, the standoff, that's the climactic, three-way standoff on Sad Hill Cemetery, which has been parodied over and over
and over
and over again. And it, again, we're going to get into that. But not only is this the first time you've seen the movie, this is your first young Clint Eastwood, your first spaghetti western, and your first Italian film?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've probably seen like regular Italian movies before, but spaghetti western, you did say that the one from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood doesn't count.
Yes, it does not count. That was a fake movie inside of a movie.
It was, but it was a fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is my first young Clint Eastwood movie, because I think I've seen, like $1 Million Baby, other movies where, he's older at the time. So yeah, I wasn't really sure what to expect with a young Clint Eastwood or Blondie.
Because Clint Eastwood is this kind of...
Get off my lawn.
Yes, Gran Torino, right? He's this iconic figure, and this is kind of what made him a star.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird when you see him so young, because I know Clint Eastwood because Clint Eastwood has been 100 years old my my entire life.
Yeah.
In this movie, he's 36 in 1966, and I'm like, when Kennedy was assassinated, you had 2 kids and a mortgage. What the fuck, dude?
I mean, he also didn't have, that grit and kind of growl to his voice. I was like, wow, kind of weird.
But yeah, so that's the crazy thing, we have the young Clint Eastwood here, the spaghetti western, and I kind of want to know, before we really get into it, what were your initial thoughts going in? Did you think you were going to like it? Did you have any preconceived notions about the movie?
Going in, I was kind of thrown, because I was like, oh man, Dean's throwing a 3-hour movie at me. What are we going to do?
I like doing that sometimes.
You do, because, I mean, we just talked about Stagecoach, and Stagecoach is a pretty fast-paced movie, and,
a pretty tight 96 minutes.
Yeah, so with this one, I'm like, okay, let's see how the story progresses in 3 hours, and it's a little slow-paced in this movie. Leone kind of, reminded me of Lynch with, these really long shots that, don't get cut right away.
He really likes holding on these wide composed shots, and he does have a very deliberately slow pace. Leone does not have this tendency to cut very quickly, like a lot of other action directors. Django, which is another spaghetti western of the same era, that's cut a lot quicker than this. But before we get really deep into the Leone style,
yes,
let's tell everybody what the movie's about.
You got the back of the box?
I got it right here. 2 scam artists are joined in an uneasy alliance when Tuco, the greedy outlaw, learns of a stash of gold buried in a distant cemetery, but only the sharpshooting Blondie knows the grave the gold is in. When the two head off, they are pursued by the heartless gunman Angel Eyes, who also wants to get his hands on the gold, and even when the duo pose as Confederate soldiers, get into a deadly shootout, and blow up a bridge, he does not relent. The film culminates in one of the most epic standoffs in cinema. Only one man will walk away with gold, and the others will end up in a shallow grave on Sad Hill Cemetery. Yeah,
We didn't even practice that.
that was good. That was solid. Like, we'll take it back to the booth, run it a couple times. I think we got a hit on our hands.
Break out the keyboard.
Break out, like, the guitar, get the whole trumpet sound going in.
I think we can make this work.
I think so. But the movie, in terms of plot, it's really kind of spaced out.
Yeah.
And, this isn't our first Leone film. We
No.
also watched Once Upon a Time in America, which also has this very slow, deliberate pace. He's very interested in composition, composing these images, portraying emotion through score and looks more than dialogue.
And score is important to me, so I'm very appreciative of that's also an important factor to him in filmmaking.
Oh, yeah. And that is kind of why his movies also seem to pull very long. And honestly, I like the pace of the movie. It is a tad slower than I think you would call any kind of action film.
Yeah, I mean, that was basically my big gripe with the movie, was that it felt like it took forever to get through this movie, and we could have cut a lot of corners to kind of, get to the point. Because I thought, I'm like, okay, it's Clint Eastwood, it's Leone, it's going to be gunfights and, just action-packed. And it was kind of, there's a lot of action to it, but it's like, it takes us a while to, get from point A to point B, being the cemetery.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting saying, point A to point B, because we don't even get to the real plot until an hour in. The first hour is all set up. We are meeting Blondie, we're meeting Tuco, we're meeting Angel Eyes. And also, Angel Eyes has one of the best introductions ever when he just walks into that house.
That's probably, I mean, apart from, the standoff, that has to be my favorite scene in the movie. Just the setup of him in the square doorway and the round
interior archway,
the arches of the house. I'm like, stylistic wise, I was like, wow, this is a really striking shot, and he's in all black. That this is the bad guy, and is everyone not going to make it in this house? Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah, because Lee Van Cleef shows up, and Lee Van Cleef, we've seen him before on the podcast because he's in Escape from New York.
Yeah.
And he just has one of the most striking bad guy faces ever. It's so like angular and tight or whatever. And in that black hat with the black clothes, and he's walking against this like idealistic landscape in the White House. He looks like the Angel of Death has walked into this place, and he doesn't say anything for like 10 fucking minutes.
Yeah, and that's something, I don't know if it made it into the podcast last week, or we were talking in the car when we were talking about Hatfield from Stagecoach.
Yes.
Where, he has this face where he could be either a good guy or a bad guy. And Angel Eyes, no, he's, textbook bad guy.
Yeah, and it's such a good introduction to his character, because he sits there, and this is kind of like the first salvo where we get the idea that there's a plot in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's when he's like talking to the guy, he's like, oh, so where'd the gold go missing? And we get an idea of that. And then we completely go away from that for about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's when we get like the Tuco and Blondie introduction. We finally get to see Clint Eastwood. But the movie is paced very weird, and it's structured very long in a lot of places. Because, yeah, it does take really an hour before we get any real plot.
Yeah. And I think that was the most frustrating, because it's like, I get that you're trying to show this is what it would be like in the Old West, the days are long, the miles are even longer, but it's just like, okay, let's get moving. Let's get to the point. I want to see Clint Eastwood. I want to see, how we actually lead up to the standoff in the very end. And I mean, very end. It's like the last few minutes of the movie, the standoff.
Yeah. It is kind of weird, because we have this perception of this very epic kind of shootout movie, this gunfight movie. The biggest images from it are the standoff in Sad Hill, Clint Eastwood when he has like the noose around his neck in like in like the hotel. But again, those are like very few and far between. There's might be an argument to be made about like the Civil War set, which is just huge.
That I didn't even think of being in the movie. Once I started seeing the soldiers, I was like, oh yeah, Civil War. But I'm like, I didn't even think it being part of this plot, because I just thought big Western, there's going to be a lot of people, shooting and guns and, horses. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, there's a war going on. Okay. And like, oh, no, we're actually going to go to, war camps and we're going to see both sides. And
Yeah, the Civil War plays a really integral part to the movie in a weird way.
yeah, it's not like, there's mention of, oh, the war is occurring, something so we kind of get, a grasp of what the time period, is in this movie. But yeah, I was kind of like, oh, okay, not what I expected, but let's see where it goes.
And where the movie goes is I find it incredibly interesting because I guess, it's pretty obvious. This feels like Tarantino has been ripping off Good and the Bad and the Ugly for years. It is one of his favorite movies. He's acknowledged that he borrows from it a lot, and it's a lot of influence. But I see it the most because in a lot of, I guess, later stage Tarantino movies, there's a lot of us kind of spending time with the characters, and it kind of unfolds slowly, and that really is what Good and the Bad and the Ugly feels like. It feels like we're just kind of hanging out with Tuco and Blondie as the movie kind of just rolls along.
With their love-hate relationship.
Did you like the Tuco Blondie thing? Because I really like that power dynamic where you can never tell if they like each other at all or they are sworn enemies, and it changes in between scenes.
Yeah, I think they really do like each other, but it's just this thing of, if someone's got to die to keep all the money, well, it's going to be me. But I mean, we see, at the end how they really feel about each other, at least Blondie, where he's just kind of like, yeah, I'll spare you. So that's why when you get, the description, only one man survives, and it's just like, no.
Yeah, well, a flowery language. One of them dies, all three of them could have died on Sad Hill. But the interesting thing about, I guess, the Tuco and Blondie relationship, because Angel Eyes is kind of off in the distance, and he's just this presence in the movie that we kind of jump back to every once in a while.
He's the shark.
He's the shark, yeah. He disappears for like over an hour of the movie, and then he just kind of reappears, and, then bad things happen.
Yeah.
But we follow Blondie and Tuco a lot. We actually follow Tuco more than we follow Blondie. So Clint Eastwood is still like a B player in Good and the Bad and the Ugly, one of his most iconic films, because Eli Wallach just owns the show.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love Tuco. I was obviously walking in, I'm like, oh, okay, Clint Eastwood is going to be, my character that I love in the movie, and I was like, oh no, I actually really love Tuco because he's got 9 lives.
He's funny, he's scummy, he's
charming,
and he's an idiot.
Yes.
I love the fact that they created this character that is so many different things at once, because he's a bad guy, but he's too dumb to be evil.
Yeah, it's not, a malicious bad guy. It's just kind of like, it pays. Let's do it. Let's go for it.
It works out, you know. And he adds so much like pathos to the character when we go to the church and he gets to see his brother. And it's like...
Yes, I lost it when it was like, oh yeah, the Ramirez brothers, because we know a couple of Ramirez brothers who we're very close to. And I was just like, yeah, even though his brother's now... he said he was a priest, right? Or he
is a priest. That's the one he talks to before he leaves, right? That they get into the fight.
And it's like, even as a priest, they're still brothers and they're still throwing hands with each other. And it's like, yeah, this looks like a real relationship.
Yeah, well, the other thing is we get to see Tuco, and he does the whole thing of like, there was only 2 ways to get out of the village. Either you become a priest or become a bandit, and you chose your path, I chose mine. And I'm like, I really start getting a sense of him as a character. He feels like the character we get to know the most about and we get to kind of care the most about.
I mean, I love during that conversation when he's like, you left, to join, the priesthood. And, I stayed with our parents, all the way up until I was 12. Like, just like, he's like 40 years old, yeah, I stood with them and I skipped my life. And it was like, homie, you're 12. You're still a child. Like,
this is the old days.
This is the old days. He was just like, oh, I'm 12, I got to get to work. I really have, my life, I got to get a handle on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole thing about that character, the Tuco character, is he's, Eli Wallach is stealing the show, right? And Clint Eastwood even acknowledged that, like, he felt like he was a secondary character in his fucking movie.
Well, yeah, because I thought, okay, this is the greatest Eastwood performance. I'm like, I gotta see why it's the greatest. And then he doesn't really talk that much. And when he does finally talk, it's a line.
Yeah.
And I was just like, with Tuco, we're getting, these deep thoughts and these funny one-liners. I mean, I love the scene when he's in the bathtub.
Yes, that is one of the funniest bits in the movie because the gunman who almost killed Tuco in the beginning, like in literally the first scene of the movie, comes in. He's like, "Hey, buddy, looks like you and me have finally crossed ways once again. Looks like it's time for you to die, and I'm about to plug you." And then Tuco just like shoots him dead, and he's like, "When you're gonna kill a man, do it. Don't talk about it."
Finally, he kind of broke like the fourth wall with, we have these bad guys and they have to do their monologue, and then obviously they die because they're talking for like 45 minutes when you could have just done what you needed to do and then
the
leave.
James Bond paradox, right?
Yes. So, I mean, I love that scene where it's not only ridiculous him taking a bath, but we see the whole sequence of him going through like the different things for the bath and making himself a bath, and it's nice and pretty, and there he is, enjoying himself. And because it's Tuco, of course he's got his gun with him in the bath. You never know who's going to show up.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me again because that's the Leone style, right?
Yeah.
But you're kind of weirded out by like Clint Eastwood's not talking a lot. Well, this is like his third film with Leone because he had done A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and it's kind of the same thing. Clint Eastwood, probably rightfully so, felt like a lot of the dialogue that was written for these kind of movies just wasn't very good. So he would try and he would ask Leone to like just condense my lines to as little as possible. And Leone also was more interested in I guess the looks characters would give than actually like the lines they would deliver. But it is really off-putting in the movie when you have Tuco, just speed running like pages and pages and pages of dialogue.
I mean, even Angel Eyes talks more than Blondie does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's just kind of so off-putting where it's like, well, I get it. You're the strong silent type. You're the mysterious guy. I'm here really just to look at you and watch what you can do. But it's just like everyone else is more or less talking. And you've got like a sentence to say here and there. It's just kind of weird.
Well, it's the establishing of that cool Clint Eastwood, the strong silent type, the guy that doesn't, does a lot but says very little. And you got to think about it in kind of context because these are, spaghetti westerns. They're responses to kind of those old John Wayne westerns, the Burt Lancaster westerns, Gary Cooper westerns.
There's no Pilgrim in this movie either before you start again.
Look here, Pilgrim. But that's the thing. Like, the movie that we have here feels like it's kind of changing that Western hero. Because in Stagecoach, we talked about it, not too long ago, where John Wayne, he's a lot more of a personable kind of character. He is kind of talking with everyone in the Stagecoach, trying to like weed everybody out,
flirting with Dallas whenever he gets the opportunity.
Yeah, big flirt, John Wayne. Big flirt, the Ringo Kid.
I mean, that man can fill out a pair of jeans.
Yes, we get it. Young John Wayne, he could get it.
Whew, and young Clint Eastwood, because I mean, we didn't really talk about it in the last episode, but I really love the costuming in this movie too.
Oh yeah, the costuming in this movie is really gritty and really dirty, and it's the opposite of Stagecoach, where Stagecoach was very maybe not like pretty, but it was a little bit more like theatrical.
Yeah.
The John Wayne Western garb felt like something you would see in like a romanticized painting of what a cowboy would look like.
And in this one, this is the, Clint Eastwood, this is the cowboy that every man wants to dress up as, with the serape and the boots and the hat. I mean, you see that costume in just about every cartoon, every riff of this movie.
Back to the Future parodies.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of interesting in that sense, because even down to the costumes, the movie's dirty. The movie's really gritty, and that's kind of the world that Leone is composing, right? He's composing the opposite of the traditional Western. And I'm wondering your thoughts on this. We watched Stagecoach, we watched Good and the Bad and the Ugly, and Stagecoach we said was like that's the foundation. That's what
Yeah.
westerns were for 20 years after it was made. And then this movie, well, the spaghetti westerns come out and it completely just washes away that romanticism, that mythology.
Oh yeah, this is the not True Grit John Wayne, but this is the true grit of the Western world and what was going on at the time. And I kind of I love the contrast between the romanticized and the realistic, where they're walking, miles and miles in the desert and they're all chapped from the wind. And it's just like, I love the realism in this movie where these could be actual real people fighting for gold.
Yes. And I love that. I love like the MacGuffin of the gold, because for the most part, the gold is only an excuse to get these characters to go from point A to point B, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that it is this gold, it's doing a lot to talk about, kind of the themes of the movie, because, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
Yeah.
We have Eli Walsh, he's playing Tuco, and he is the ugly. And what makes him the ugly? Because Blondie, he's the good. Lee Van Cleef, Angel Eyes, he's the bad. But it's like they're all bad.
Yeah,
they're all kind of good. I mean, I guess except Angel Eyes, he's pure evil.
Yeah,
but the ugly is their greed. They're all greedy men.
That's why I was sitting there and trying to figure out when I watch it, because I'm like, it's not ugly in a literal sense. I'm like,
the movie's beautiful.
Yeah, the movie's beautiful, but the character of ugly. I was just like, okay, I'm like, is it ugly that, he's just very blatantly honest with his intentions? It's like...
Is he ugly because he's a Jewish actor playing a Mexican?
I mean, I've never heard of Eli Walsh before.
Or Walsh?
Walsh?
Yeah. I also called him Eli Walsh for years until somebody pronounced it in front of me. I was like, oh yeah, that is not how it's pronounced at all.
Yeah, so it's like, I had no idea who he was. Yeah, wow, surprised he's not a Mexican actor, but
you were like, I was about to claim him for my people.
He looked like one of my grandpa's brothers. That's why I was just kind of like,
for real?
That's why I was just kind of like, I think that's maybe why I gravitated towards his character, because he just reminded me of family. But he was also the most realistic character, where it was just well, I've gotten myself into another jam. All right, I'll find a way to get out of it, and yeah, if I gotta lay here by the train tracks and wait for them to, break the cuffs off of me, we'll do that, and we'll just keep moving on from there. It's just like, damn, Tuco.
I love that stunt, right? Because that's actually Eli Wallach, and what happens is he's gotten arrested, and they're going to take him to like a prison camp and all this other stuff, and he jumps off a train with the guard that's locked him up, and now he's like, well, I killed the guard, but now I'm stuck in the desert with him handcuffed to me. Oh, there's another train coming. I got it. And he sets it up, and it's a real fucking train, right?
Yeah.
And it's careening down, and it's this beautiful shot where the train's coming, and Eli Walsh is like crouching down and has the chain right on the rail, right?
Yeah.
And as it's coming through, it runs over the chain and breaks it, right?
Yeah.
What's crazy about it is there's a step on that train that passes by. You can see it in the movie. It passes, I think, an inch over his head.
Yeah.
If Eli Walsh fucked up, the movie's over. He's dead. He's decapitated.
Oh, yeah. That was a thing where they said that he almost died 3 times during the making of the movie. That was one, because he could have been decapitated. I'm struggling to remember the second one. But the first one was that someone during production, I guess when he was, in the middle of a scene, taking a break, he had his soda next to him, and someone set down a bottle of acid for whatever.
Oh, yeah,
and he
the acid to loosen up the cloth on the gold bags.
Yeah, so he ended up picking that up and drinking out of it, and it, obviously made him sick because it's acid. And it was, a gripe that, he almost lost his life 3 times for the movie. And, a lot of people were saying that was kind of a Leone thing, where it was just he wasn't really into safety. It was more just the vision and, getting this completed. And I was like, yeah, but, you got real people out here that, you could kill them with some of the things that are happening. It's kind of terrifying.
Oh, the second part you were thinking of, I know which one it is, because it's also the one that Clint Eastwood straight up refused to do.
Oh, the horse.
Oh, it wasn't just the horse. Well, the horse I think also did it, but the one that Eastwood refused to do when the bridge blows up, right?
Yeah.
Because there's the big, beautiful Civil War battlefield where it's like 1,000 extras,
Yeah.
and they're blowing up a bridge, right? Because the Tuco and Blondie have the genius idea of like they're fighting over the bridge. If we blow up the bridge, they'll leave.
They're distracted.
Exactly. So they blow up the bridge, and it's a real ass explosion. They're using like actual like a ton of dynamite to blow up this bridge, and we see the shot where Eastwood and Wallach are crouched down behind this little like sand bunker, right? And it explodes, and you can see what looks to be like a cinder block fling by, and it crashes right against the sandbags.
Yeah.
About a foot away from Eastwood's head. And yeah, because it was in not Eastwood, it was the stuntman, because Eastwood said, "Oh, you're gonna really blow up a bridge? Well, fuck that, I'm standing back here. Get one of the stuntmen to sit there." Yeah,
I wouldn't be sitting there, that close. It's gonna look beautiful, but yeah, that's okay. I don't want to risk, something flying off and taking my head off.
Yeah, but you are kind of right. Leone did have this thing of being this perfectionist, and he did have this tendency to maybe do some things that were a little too dangerous for a movie.
Yeah, because I think one of the other ones that, could have killed him was when Tuco's on the horse and he's completely, wrapped up in the rope. He's got, to restrain him so he could be hung. So when the horse takes off and he, the horse is going and he's sitting on the horse with his hands behind his back. Yeah, that actually happened. There was something happened and the horse did get spooked and it took off, and they used that scene. And he's like, the horse wouldn't stop. And he's like, and they didn't try to stop the horse. They just let me keep going. And I mean, cinematically, it looks great, seeing him take off. It's funny. But it's like, yeah, I'd be terrified being on a horse and not knowing, is this horse going to buck me off? And I'm, I can't protect myself if I go flying off the horse.
Yeah, because that is one of those things, because that happens twice in the movie. Because the setup of why Tuco and Blondie are scam artists is because one of my favorite like scams in all of movies is Tuco has this $3,000 bounty on his head, right?
That he's very proud of.
For good reason. There's a long list of things he's done. And Blondie has this idea of like, well, I can capture you, turn you in for the reward money, and then if I save you before you're hung, I can just go to the next town and turn you in and keep doubling up on my reward money.
He's basically a bounty hunter.
Exactly. So Tuco's there and he's on the horse, and they're about to like hang him, and he shoots the rope, and then rides off into the sunset, right?
Also, one of the biggest massacres in this movie are the hats.
Oh, yes. Eastwood shoots off like 12 hats in this movie just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious, but I'm like, those poor hats. I mean, it's like every town, every, execution, I'm going to destroy the rope, and then I'm going to throw people off by shooting their hats off.
You just really like that hat game.
I like his hat game. He's got a nice hat.
It's a strong hat.
Yes.
Strong hat. But it's very interesting how the movie is composing a lot of those moments, right? Because the action beats, for the most part, are pretty sparsed out. We have, the beginning where Tuco kills the 3 gunmen and then jumps out the window. We have...
With what is it, a turkey leg?
With a turkey leg in hand, yeah. And then it's like, we get Angel Eyes, and he kills the 2 guys, and he kills the guy and his son, and then rides off into the sunset. And then we have Blondie and the Tuco and that like shootout thing, and then the movie kind of even slows down a little bit more from that, because there's a whole sequence of Eastwood and Wallach just wandering the desert.
Yeah.
And that goes on for like 10 minutes. I mean, it's really good.
It felt longer than that.
It might be longer than that, but like that's good because it establishes like the heat and how the environment's super dangerous, but it's not an action scene. Like that's the thing. Like,
and we finally see oh my god, they said his name so much and I can't think of it now. The guy with the eye patch, the one that has the information about the gold.
It's like Clint Baker
or
Bob something. It's Bob Carson.
Bob Carson. There you go. We finally
or Bill Carson.
Bill Carson, Bob Carson.
It's a BC there.
Yeah, eye patch dude. We finally get to Bill or Bob.
We get to the plot.
And it's like, oh my god, this name, Angel Eyes, who's been looking for this guy. We finally found him. And then he dies. And it's just like, okay. And then, Blondie's like, well, I got the information as I pass out.
Because he knows, like, Tuco's got to save him, because he
Yeah.
knows Tuco's greedier than he is filled with hate for Blondie, which is great.
Yeah.
But what I was kind of alluding to before, the movie, spaces out its action beats a lot. Would you quantify this as an action film? There's a lot of good action beats in it.
There are, but yeah, they're so very spread out that, it's like for a while, it gets pretty quiet and you're just like, okay. And then action happens all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, that's right. This is a Western. This is an action movie. It's like, I guess you can.
Yeah,
but
well, the other thing is a lot of the action is, somebody pulls a gun on Blondie, he shoots them, and then they are dead, and that's it.
Yeah. This isn't like other Westerns, gunslinger movies where, it's constant, a barrage of bullets and, people falling to the ground. This one, it's very strategic until we finally get to those moments where Blondie could show off, I got the fastest hands in the West, who's coming at me.
Yeah, this isn't like the Wild Bunch.
Mm-mm.
This isn't like even like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's really wild to me because I wouldn't call this an action movie. I would call it an epic.
Yeah.
It's almost like an opera. It's very dramatic. It's very big.
Yeah.
It's a lot of melodrama going on, but I call it an opera. That's probably because of the score.
Yes.
There's no way to talk about Sergio Leone without talking about Ennio Morricone.
No. I mean, the score is another character in this movie, and I know I say that a lot with, other epic scores, but I mean, this score is heard in every scene of the movie.
It's half the cast. It's half the performance.
It's not even, the score, it's the main theme. That's what we hear throughout, and it's just in different variations that we hear it, where it's more of the the animalistic, where you hear like the coyote mixed in with the theme, or
within the strings and all that other stuff.
And then you have the more kind of melodic ones where it's just you're hearing like the actual orchestra play over, and that one's more satisfying. But the the one with the strings and the animals, then you feel like I'm in danger, something bad's gonna happen. But I mean, Ecstasy of Gold.
Yes, the Ecstasy of Gold is legitimately one of my favorite like musical pieces ever.
It's up there with the Lawrence of Arabia theme, Casablanca.
Time Goes By.
Yeah.
Iconic songs of cinema, like the music of 2001.
Yeah.
Dun dun dun. Yeah, there's so many great musical pieces, but the Ecstasy of Gold, that build up, it gives you chills.
It does.
Especially when Tuco's running around and he's in Sad Hill and he's looking for it, and the camera's spinning and spinning until we just like lose Tuco, because it's so overwhelming where he is, and you kind of just pull into it, and it's insane. It is like pure cinema. I've used the term like pure cinema a few times before, but this is like communicating so much emotionally, mentally, iconically with just like the camera work and the music, and without dialogue, and its actor's performance, it's so good.
Well, I mean,
it's so good.
We're also told, the gold's buried in a cemetery, and right away I think of like like the ghost town cemetery at like Knott's, where it's a smallish cemetery, and then you get there and it's just like, no, it's acres of land with just makeshift headstones. It's
Sad Hill, and it is epic.
And it's just like, my God, how are you going to find this? Even if you have the name for, as the marker where the gold is buried, you'd have to go and look at every single cross to finally get to that.
Yeah, and, I've seen a lot of cheaper movies like this, cheaper spaghetti westerns, cheaper like foreign Italian films, action films, things like that. And a lot of those movies, that's what you would get, oh, we're going up to Boot Hill, and Boot Hill is 12 headstones in the middle of nowhere.
Hey, we love walking through Boot Hill at Knott's.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like the thing, in your head you think it is going to be, 12 headstones, maybe 20, the production did it in like a weekend, all right? He probably blew all his money on the fucking Civil War thing. They can't be that big. Then you see it, and it's like, you carved out the entire valley to make this like football field sized graveyard, and yeah, it feels like so overwhelming when you see it, because yeah, the logic of that moment is, Tuco, even if you had a week, you might not even find the guy.
Yeah.
And it's a thing where it's like, it's also this thing that goes into one of the themes of the movie, is this very anti-war and cost of violence in, war, in cinema, in, human nature, because, they're here to take the gold out of like literal graves. They're grave robbers, right? And it's like, oh, all these men died just for like the profits of this. Like, that's what it's all been about. And it's beautiful. But fun fact about Sad Hill, right?
Yeah.
So that was an actual set. It was built in Spain.
Yeah.
There's a documentary on Netflix that you can watch. It's called Sad Hill Unearthed, where these Spanish fans who, grew up watching Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, they were like, well, yeah, it was filmed over there because it just gone into disrepair. It was completely emptied. And they completely rebuilt the cemetery.
Awesome.
They dug it up. They found the actual original stones or whatever. And if you donated, I think it was like $100 for the restoration project, your name got put onto one of the headstones.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, but the thing is anytime I think a member of the cast or crew passed away, they have like headstones reserved for those people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Lee Van Cleef's on there, Eli Wallach's on there, Sergio Leone's on there, and there's one spot reserved for like Clint Eastwood, right?
Yeah.
Because I think he did a Skype call to when they opened it up as like a tourist attraction, and he was like, last time I was out there, shit, I had hair. And,
Yeah. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, it's like giant, when I was doing my research about the movie and Marfa, Texas, and I was showing you that that vlog that one guy did, and he went out and like all the stuff from the ranches were still there. The like Bix Ranch, the sign was still there. The windmill from like Jet's, property, that was still standing. And it's like, wow, some of these places, they still exist. They're not just, alive in these movies. They're still out there. And that's why, I love being a fan of movies and, seeing other fans of movies that go and love restoring and keeping these places preserved because they matter.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the beauty of Good and the Bad and the Ugly, is because it's one of those movies that kind of like, was a calling card, right? Like it was like, okay, every Western that comes after this movie needs to acknowledge it, right? Yeah. We do not get The Wild Bunch. We don't get Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. We don't get Unforgiven. We don't get Dances with Wolves. We don't get,
Tombstone.
We don't get Quigley Down Under, without having this revisionist look, this dirty, gritty look at the Western, the demystification of the Western in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the Dollars trilogy, and the Italian film culture that looked at the Western and said, well, we can do this, but we are going to make it more violent. We're going to make it more gritty. We're going to make it a little bit more realistic. Because we don't want to have singing Gene Autry as our Western hero anymore.
We want, real people.
Yes. But,
even though I'm sure, way back in the day, cowboys were singing Happy Trails.
Probably. But, speaking of, we want realistic things, one thing that's not realistic, and I wonder if you picked it up. So did you like the dubbing in the movie?
Yeah. Believe me, I picked it up. I was like, is that just me? I'm like,
is this movie out of sync?
Yeah, I did pause it a couple of times. I'm like, okay, let me, start it again so I can get it to. And I was like, oh, it is dubbed. Huh. Weird.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you enjoy this kind of style of the spaghetti Western, but if you do get into it, or if our conversation has sparked you wanting to watch more of these movies, they're all like this.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, and this is, I'm pretty sure this is actually accurate, Italian film culture, like filmmaking, this goes back to like the neo-realist, Fellini, De Sica. They would not record live audio.
Yeah.
So they would just have you say your lines in whatever language you spoke.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it in movies like Suspiria, where there's actors who spoke only German, only French, only Italian, and then your lead only spoke English. And you would just kind of do your performance in whatever language you got, and the other guy would then just do his lines in whatever language he had, and then they would just dub that fucker over in post.
Yeah.
Which is so weird because the movie's actually like well acted, but it blows my mind because, you know, you are Clint Eastwood,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I am the sheriff. I'm only speaking Italian to you, and you have no idea what the fuck I'm saying.
Yeah, you just have to know your lines and be like, okay, well, I delivered my sentence. Now what do we do?
And I think that's kind of why the movies kind of works and why that Clint Eastwood like silent type works, because
Mhm.
it's feeling a lot more like emotive than like dialogue driven. You know, we're getting a lot more of a sense of like feeling than we are getting a sense of maybe like character revelation through dialogue. It is just a weird thing about Italian movies is that they're all fucking dubbed like this, worse than bad kung fu movies.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we're getting a lot of emotion, expression, so that's kind of nice to see it, you know, versus just lines and monologues. It's like, no, you know, we're actually getting the human experience and kind of just trying to, you know, read the characters, basically.
Yeah, but so I think I've exhausted my little list of talking points, at least so for now. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about the movie?
I mean, I just have my calendar in front of me, but you know, we hit costuming, we talked about music because the music is so important, beautiful in this movie. We talked a little bit about the iconography because this movie is iconic.
I mean, you just look at that silhouette of Clint Eastwood with the poncho and the hat and whatnot. Like what was that Johnny Depp animated movie with the lizard?
Oh, Rango.
Rango?
Yeah.
In Rango, you have a Clint Eastwood character show up that is dressed like he is in Good and the Bad and the Ugly.
I mean, you have Star Wars, Boba Fett. Some of his costume was inspired by Clint Eastwood.
The poncho thing?
Yeah, like the cape, the poncho that he has. His mannerisms where he doesn't really speak, but, you know, he's got fast hands. You know, he's a bounty hunter. So it's just, you see
literally in Star Wars when Han shoots who's it?
Greedo.
Shoots Greedo underneath the table. That's the same move Lee Van Cleef does in the opening of this movie. Again, echoes.
Tuco too, you know, was shooting through the water. It's like, you know, or shooting through the bubbles at least. It's like, you know, you see all these calling cards back to these movies that have inspired so many other filmmakers. And
I mean, Tarantino owes a lot of his filmmaking style to Leone.
Yeah. But I think one thing we could talk about is the is it the hate relationship between Leone and Clint Eastwood?
Yes. I guess it's probably good due diligence to talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff that comes out after this movie. Because
I was shocked that this was the third film in the trilogy. Because I've never seen the trilogy before. You know, I wasn't sure if, you know, is this what we're starting with? You know, we're starting with this, you know, epic, and then we're moving, you know, progressionally with, you know, what happens after he gets the money. And it's like, no, you know, this is the end.
Yeah, because this is called... This trilogy, you can either call it like the Man with No Name trilogy or the Dollars trilogy. It really depends on who you're talking to. But they're 3 movies. They're all thought to be connected because they're connected in themes and in actions, and a lot of the actors repeat themselves over and over again. They usually have Clint Eastwood as the lead, as the star, as, you know, the quiet gunman who comes into town and does yada yada yada. But it's really weird when you really look at them as a trilogy, because Fistful of Dollars is literally a remake of Yojimbo, a Kurosawa film about a wandering samurai comes in the town and, you know, comedy ensues. But they all get a little bit bigger as they go on. This is the third film in the franchise. It's the most expensive one. It's the one that's the actual epic. if you were looking for one that was more of an action film, Fistful of Dollars is probably where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few dollars more is a little bit more like this. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit more, has a little bit more pathos to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, none of them even come close to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is Leone's first masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because he makes 6 or 7 movies in his lifetime, and 3 of them are masterpieces. This is the first one.
But we have the controversy between Leone and Eastwood.
Yes.
Because I think I read, that Leone was just kind of, criticizing Eastwood's performance and kind of demeanor. And I know there was a thing where he tried to drag in De Niro when they were working on Once Upon a Time in America. And I think he was doing like an interview and he was like, oh, Bobby's great. Bobby really knows how to act and he could do this, this, and that, unlike some people. And it's just like...
Yeah.
Like, ooh.
Because it is a thing where their relationship was... Yeah, you can call it hate. I think they both respected each other, but as things go on, because Leone always wanted to bring Eastwood back.
Yeah, and Eastwood was like, "I'm done with you. I've put up with enough. We're good."
Yeah, because if you know anything about Clint Eastwood's directorial style, it's the exact opposite of Leone. Eastwood's like, one take, that's all we need, and we're moving on very quick. All that stuff. Leone was a perfectionist, and he really put Eastwood through the ringer. He would make him do dozens and dozens and dozens of takes, and this movie's 3 hours long, and there's shit that was cut from this, and you got to think how many things were in the movie and how many takes all these things took, and he's using one camera, all those 50 different angles. He's making Eastwood stand there for 2 days as he's catching everything.
In 2 different countries.
Yeah, 3 different countries, I think. But that's, again, a whole other can of worms. But he tries to get Eastwood to come back for Once Upon a Time in the West, and Eastwood just refuses.
Yeah.
He says, I don't want to do that. I don't want to fly out anywhere. I'm good. That's why he got Charles Bronson. And then when he did Once Upon a Time in America, he was like, I was going to get Eastwood, but then De Niro showed up, and, he's a better actor than Clint Eastwood. And, Clint Eastwood didn't really take that too well. Yeah,
didn't he send a serape to somebody that was on the set or working part of the Once a Time in America set?
What's a serape?
What you want, what he wears.
Oh, the poncho. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. I don't know these fancy words.
Well, I think the difference between a serape and a poncho is a poncho has a hood.
Oh, is that what the difference is?
I think so. So a serape, it's just, it drapes over you, it protects you, but it doesn't have the hood.
Oh, I see.
So, so I think he did send it to someone on the set kind of like, well, I know you're probably going to show it to, Leone, so, let's do that. And then I think after this movie, he gave his serape to a Mexican restaurant somewhere here in Northern California.
Okay, that's...
And they hung it up in the restaurant, and it was just if people knew, they knew, and if they didn't, they had no idea that, a piece of Hollywood history was sitting right there.
Yeah, and I mean that is kind of the crazy aftermath of the movie, and also gives into the weird nature of the budget, because it had a really big budget for the time. It was a 1.6 million, and Eastwood's I used most of my own clothes. Most of the costume was mine. He's the boots were mine from Rawhide. The hat I got from some tailor shop or whatever. And it's bro, this is you see the Civil War set. They couldn't afford to get you a new costume or whatever, because that serape, see, I'm using the word now.
You are.
That's from the first 2 movies.
Yeah.
And it's the same one. It had never been washed.
Yeah, I liked when I read about that. I'm like, that just adds to the character. I mean, this is the West, it's not going to be, ooh, I got really dusty today. Let me go, wash my pants, my this. It's no, they get up and they go. And he doesn't look like, wow, this, can't really call him a cowboy, but, this bounty hunter, he's super clean,
It's the difference between John Wayne, who looks like he just, fresh shave when he shows up in Stagecoach, versus, Blondie here, where he looks like, bro, you rode in from the desert kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the interesting thing. The movie and all those props and all this other thing, it has this very weird feel about it, because it has this kind of it has this big epic grand quality of a blockbuster, but
Yeah.
the nature of it feels like kind of a gritty exploitation film with like a lot of the costuming, a lot of like the violence of the movie, because it's
Mhm.
not gory in any way. I mean, the most rough part of the movie is when they're beating the shit out of Tuco, the
Yeah.
torture scene.
Yeah, that was a rough scene, and a fact that the band that's playing knows that the reason we're playing is because Angel Eyes is beating the crap out of somebody in there, and you have, what is it, the violinist,
Yes.
where he just stops and he's crying, and they tell him, you better start playing again. You just feel so many emotions.
I love that scene because, again, without saying anything, it tells you so much. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, so
Another one.
another one. All the guys know he's crying. The violinist guy is crying, and it's this little like Italian dude who's just like, oh, tears or whatever. And they're like, keep playing, goddammit. And it's like, that tells you so much about this world, this like, again, rough and tumble gritty
Hmm.
world that is just so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just really love this movie. It's a very, very good movie.
It is. I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected. Still, biggest gripe is such a long movie, and I feel like, a lot of it could have been condensed down to move at a faster pace.
Well, there is an American cut of this. Well, there's two cuts of the movie. There's the one that we watched,
Hmm.
which was called the extended American cut. That's
Okay.
the 3-hour one. There's another one that was the original English theatrical release. That's like 160 minutes,
Hmm.
where they just like trim off like 18-20 minutes of the movie. So that's probably one of those things where they just chop up a lot of the scenes and make them a lot tighter.
Yeah.
But then I feel like you doing that, you lose a lot of the score tying in and building up and things like that. Because that's why the movie's so fucking long. Because Leone refused to cut Morricone's score in scenes.
Yeah, I mean, that I could totally understand, just taking in the views,
Mm.
because, I mean, it's supposed to be, like Santa Fe, New Mexico here, and it's like, no, it's Rome or it's Spain, but it's just like, it's beautiful to see the mountains and, the desert, and it's like, yeah, I enjoy looking at all of this and kind of just feeling like I'm standing in the middle of this desert.
Like
But-
the opening shot where it's this beautiful mountain range, and
Yeah.
then some guy's ugly face punches into the frame.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, what the hell is going on? This dude's just like, mugging in the camera, like, okay, like, move please. I want to keep looking at this town and, the surroundings. But yeah, I guess that's his directorial style, is just, we do long cuts and we, really zoom in on faces.
Yep.
And I know that's also to help us, come down the line later in the movie when this guy meets up with Tuco in the bathtub.
Yeah, it's that one in the opening shot serves that story point, and also, like you said, Leone likes contrasting huge, beautiful landscapes in this giant, 70 millimeter looking frame, and then contrasting that with super tight close-ups, like the Sad Hill, the shootout.
Mm-hmm.
We go from this giant, like massive wide shot to close-ups of eyes to hands to close-up to
Mhm.
eyes to massive wide shots, and it builds up all that tension. And I think that's amazing part of the movie is it builds up so well. Like the movie goes along and it's getting closer and closer to the cemetery, it's building up all that tension, and you're just
Mhm.
like I get so invested in this movie as I watch it, because again, we have similar tastes, but we have very different views on film pace. I was like a lot happier with the 4+ hours of Once Upon a Time in America than you were.
Yeah, and I mean, I think of the two movies, I prefer Once Upon a Time in America more over than The Good, Bad, the Ugly.
Really?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot more plot and storyline, and things are happening, and there's betrayals, and we're seeing these kids, go from childhood to adulthood. So, we're really traveling with the characters, and in this movie, it's, I don't know, days, weeks that we're with the characters.
I think they mentioned it's around 8 months is the length of the entire 3-hour film.
Okay, so 8 months, while it's still a long period of time.
It's not the 40 years we're seeing in Once Upon a Time in America.
No, so that's why it's very different. Where it's a beautiful movie, aesthetic. The characters are iconic, but Once Upon a Time in America, we're growing up with these characters, and we're just seeing how they betray each other, even though they've kind of been a family to each other since childhood.
And I think that's an interesting thing that shows up a lot in Leone's work is betrayal is a very central theme in a lot of his films. And in this one, it's the kind of playful betrayal between Tuco and Blondie. But in Once Upon a Time in America, it's a very like darker, sadder betrayal between De Niro and James Woods' character. And it is interesting because I really would have thought you would have pulled to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly over Once Upon a Time in America.
Well, I mean, I love character development.
You like a lot more character-driven films.
Yeah, and in this movie, Tuco is a character of all characters, and I absolutely loved him. But it's just, it was just very quiet, very kind of enjoying the sights and what's going on. But yeah, I really didn't feel like this was a very character-driven movie.
I can see where you're coming from because our characters feel so foreign and so quiet and so detached from everything going on. Like Eastwood's Blondie feels completely detached from like the shit he's seeing.
Yeah, that's why it's like we don't have any backstory on Angel Eyes. So it'd be different if we're coming in and we saw these guys, and how they ended up being the men that we're seeing on the screen.
You're like, I don't want the 6-hour cut of Once Upon a America, but I want the 6-hour cut of Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah,
I want more.
I want to see how we've gotten to this point, because I mean, during this time, in history, a lot of people didn't make it to old age because lots of different things are happening, and especially if you have, cowboys and gunslingers and bandits, it's like, I
just find it fascinating. You're like, 3-hour movie? This is too much. I mean, if they added another hour and a half to explain Blondie, it's...
I need some backstory.
I really think you would enjoy the rest of the Dollars trilogy, because Fistful of Dollars, I think is actually like a tight 90. I don't think it's actually very long. I think A Few Dollars More is about 2.5, maybe between 2 and 2.5. So I think you would probably really dig those ones.
Okay.
Also, Fistful of Dollars, for my money, best Clint Eastwood introduction in any movie. But I guess that kind of rounds us out. So your final thought on the movie, didn't like it?
No, I liked it. It's just, ran a little slow, needed a little bit more, just needed more words in it. I mean, I felt like, Tuco was really the only one talking in this movie. And rightfully so. That's how he kind of, gets around things. He talks, he creates stories. Like his brother, he's like, oh, you left your wife behind. And he's like, well, which one? I always have one wherever I go. And then you see him get in the stagecoach with Blondie. And he's like, oh, yeah, my brother, he loves me. He was begging me to stay. And it's just kind of like, well, I want to know this kind of sad backstory to you where you feel like you have to lie about, the great things in your life because you don't really have that much. So it's like, I'd love to see more, the character-driven sides. But no, I love the movie. Very iconic, beautiful, the music, amazing. I would recommend.
You would recommend?
If people have, 3 hours to spare, recommend.
Okay. I see what you're getting at. Like, I can understand why it's not your cup of tea necessarily, but it is definitely mine.
I know.
Loved this movie. Yeah, this was like Eastwood westerns were a staple in my household. Me and my dad, we watched like all these kinds of movies. But yeah, Good and the Bad and the Ugly, I think again, it's one of the Leone masterpieces. I adore the film. I think it's such a massive achievement of cinema. It really is kind of one of the benchmarks of the Western genre that all other Westerns are going to be measured by, But Yeah, I would 100% recommend this to anybody, even if you don't have 3 hours. Make the 3 hours. Get it done. This is necessary viewing for any film nerd.
Yeah, that's true.
But next week, we are doing a film that's completely different.
That's right. We're doing a Western that's more my speed, my style. I think you could classify it as a Western. It mostly sticks within, the Western timeline, even though we break a little bit.
Once we go to the Warner Brothers backlot.
We do, because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite movies, definitely on my top 100, Blazing Saddles.
Mel Brooks, Cleveland Little, Gene Wilder.
Madeline Kahn.
The film that really put Mel Brooks on a pedestal of comedy that all others are measured by. It's a movie that continually people say could never be made today.
Absolutely not.
But still everyone says it can never be made today, but it's one of the funniest movies ever made.
I mean, in the same token, he just came out with History of the World Part 2 on Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen, I think, maybe 3 episodes. And I mean, it's a lot like Blazing Saddles. And, it's kind of, you kind of have to understand he's not going after anybody. He makes fun of everybody.
Yes. But I can't wait to talk about that.
Oh, me too. I'm so excited to finally talk about Blazing Saddles.
Yes, but if you wanted to get that episode, where can they go?
Well, if you want to listen to us on a different platform than you currently are, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube.
Yes, you can find our YouTube channel on the Film Vault. That's the Film Vault on YouTube. You can go like, comment, subscribe. Check out all of our cool slideshows.
We love slideshows
of this podcast. And if you wanted to follow us on social media, you can go to
the Film Club Podcast on Instagram, where we post upcoming episodes, daily stories, random trivia, and our random adventures we go on.
And with that,
we'll see you next week at the Film Club.
Have a good week, everybody.